Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Health Record Systems and Issues. Today, our lesson is going to be about filing systems and numbering systems, which kind of overlap a little. And we're also going to be talking about the alphabetic rules. And I know you might think you know them all, but I think it'd be worth your time and effort to actually go through all of this. It doesn't sound like a big deal, but it kind of is. And why would you need to know all this if there's actually computerized records or electronic health records right now? Well, because those systems sometimes go down. Some of the smaller healthcare organizations or clinics or physicians' offices may not have converted to computerized records yet. Yes, I know they're supposed to be, but some have not. And some also, you know how they scan in the records? Well, they still have paper records also. And even if they are electronic, what about those older records that aren't in the system? Because we just started electronic records as of 2010. So everything before that was paper. Well, you have to know the numbering systems because they may be stored somewhere and you may actually have to go and pull those files for some reason. Another example would be, let's say you go to work at the VA. Well, those records, instead of being stored the minimal or amount that is typical and required, which we'll get into later in the lesson, those records have to be stored for a veteran's lifetime, the entire lifetime. So although their records now are computerized, they still have paper records that are stored elsewhere, okay? So whenever you go and pull records, you have to know which filing system they're using, right? Or you're not going to be able to tell. And I'll tell you a little story about my personal experience whenever I first became an HIM director. And I went to the facility and I my first day in there, and I'm just training for a few days. I've got very few days with the director so that I can find out what's going on. And I asked her what type of filing system they use. And she said, oh, we use terminal digit. Terminal digit. Okay. I kept looking at the records and I thought, this isn't right. This isn't right. Long story short, they were using a straight numeric file system in their policies and procedures, both there in the facility and at corporate. It said that they would be filed by terminal digit. So guess what one of our major projects was? Exactly. We had to convert the entire file room from straight numeric to terminal digit filing. Now, being the crafty person that I am, I was like, okay, I need help with this. And I had been taking students and for clinical rotations. And so I called Dr. Trawick, who was the chairman of the HIM program at UAMS at the time. And I said, I had this situation and I was hoping that maybe I could get some students to come in and help me with this project. And it would be a wonderful learning experience for them, and it would really, really help me out, and I could oversee the whole thing, and we would all be in there working together. She thought it sounded like a great idea, and so we did. And very fortunately, it was a small facility and relatively small file room. It took us a while. I'm talking days, many days, but we did actually finally get it all converted, and it was quite the job, to say the very least. But then it was actually the way it was supposed to be. That's my personal story of, yes, you may use this at some point. Another thing is, if you go to work at a physician's office, many physician's offices use alphabetic filing systems. And if you don't know the rules, you can really get some misfiles there. So we're going to talk about all of this. I'm going to try, I know there's a lot of slides this time, but I'm going to try to go relatively quickly and skim the surface, because you have a lot of reading to do. I've attached several different articles. They're a little bit older, but they have proven over time to be worth hanging on to. And you may want to actually, I know you don't want to kill a tree, but you might want to download it or even print it out and put it in a handy dandy notebook for possible future reference to go back to, because I know the textbook doesn't give you a whole lot of practice, and at some point you might have to actually give an in-service to your staff or the staff of the hospital, which is phase 2 of my project that I had. Once we converted it over, we had to train the entire hospital staff, because it was a small records, and after hours, certain people would be in charge of pulling records when they were needed. So I had to train different people on how to do that, and because they had never really had to deal with terminal digit filing. So now I know, because I know different people in the profession, and I know that I'm not the only one that's run across this particular problem and others. So it would behoove you to pay attention to this lesson, and also because they will likely test you on this on the RHIT exam, and you know you're going to have testing on it in here. Let's just face it, it's going to happen. Okay? Now, in case of an emergency too, when systems go down and you, even for example, the floods in New Orleans or what have you, you have to resort to paper records because you can't get power, you don't have a computer system. You have to do what you can do in that emergency situation, which is why we're learning these things, right? We're prepared. Yes. Okay, with that said, I'm going to turn my lovely face off, and you are going to watch the PowerPoints, and we're going to talk about these, okay? Okay, our lesson for today is numbering and filing systems and alphabetic rules. And I say computer lab because you're going to be allowed time to practice this and to do these assignments, because I have different ones. There's one on numbering and filing system, one on alphabetical rules, and different things like that. So you're going to get practice, okay? Okay, the filing systems that we are going to look at are straight numeric, middle digit, and terminal digit, and then we'll talk a little bit later about the alphabetic filing. Okay, straight numeric, you read from the left to the right in order from lowest to highest. So on the shelf of records, they're just going to, fall right in line. Okay, go straight down the line. Middle digit, you read the middle digits first, and then the left to the right, and charts are segmented into 100 charts per number order. This is all going to make a little more sense in a few minutes. Now, the disadvantage to middle digit is that it causes gaps on the filing shelves, because you have to allot, if you're allotting 100 charts per number order, then it's going to cause those gaps, and you might have a whole lot of charts on one end and nothing on the other, or vice versa, or in the middle. It's just not even. Okay, straight numeric, you're going to have them all start out in one end and go to the other. Okay, so you might have, if you've got a big file room for a large facility that's just opening up, or even a small one, you're going to start on one end of the file room with the charts and go to the other. So all the weight's going to be on one end of the file room, and that can cause some issues. Records, paper records, think about the weight involved, okay? And I'll tell you a story about that in a minute. Now, so if you're doing middle digit, you're going to have those gaps in the shelves, okay? And that can also lead to uneven weight distribution. Now, for the ideal, we use terminal digit. You read the last digits first, then from left to right. Okay? And then it allows for even distribution in the filing area, and there's less misfiles this way. And we also use something called color coding, and that also helps with misfiles. Let's take a look at this slide, okay? Let me see if I can get this trusty pointer here. You see, I'm hoping you can see this, okay? We have these bottom two numbers. Maybe I should pencil this in a little bit. These bottom two right here, okay? Then these two, and these two, okay? We're looking at those numbers, and those are actually just stickers. You can order folders that have those numbers pre-printed on them, but it turns out that it's less expensive to do it yourself if you have the time, and plus that allows you to also have extra volumes of one record. Like if you're in a physician's office, typically you're not going to have more than one volume of a record, but if you are in a hospital or a long-term care facility, you may have more than one volume, and a volume is the contents of one folder, okay? And you see here, this is where you would punch the holes at the top of those files and slide them on here, Okay? Same way here. Usually they put the face sheet over here, but not always. It depends on the facility. Sometimes they use this side for, they may use it for things that were copied and sent from other facilities, so that's not considered part of this legal record because we can't release information that was given to us from outside sources, like from another healthcare facility. Okay, they have to go to that facility to get it. I know it sounds like crazy, but trust me, that's the way it is. Okay, so for right now, we're just dealing with 6 digits. Okay, and I want you to keep that in mind. So when you're adding these numbers, you can see here how we're putting on these numbers 2 at a time. And this medical record that we're using as an example, you read the number from left to right if you're just reading it. 348210. Okay? 348210. You see our 10 here, and we've got it here. Okay? The last 2 numbers are the primary digits. Those are primary digits. These are the numbers that you use to find the correct shelving unit. Typically, on the end of the shelving unit, it's going to be labeled with those primary numbers that are down that shelving unit. Okay, so you can find it and walk to it, and once you start pulling records, trust me, you get to where you just about know where to find them. Okay? The secondary digits would be here. So when you're reading medical record 348210, 82 here is the secondary digits. Secondary digits are the middle 2 numbers. Okay? Terminal, middle. And these numbers are used to find the correct shelf within the shelving unit. Okay? So shelving unit, shelf. Wonder what's next? We're still working with 348210, but we're reading 34 now. 34. What's the 34? That's a tertiary digit. Okay? Tertiary digits are the top remaining numbers, and these are used last to file in order on the shelf. So here we have the shelving unit. Here we had the shelf, right? And now we're picking the order. So you go here first, here first, here, and here. Terminal digit means you start at the end. So when we're reading 348210, if we're filing it, we kind of read it backwards, is in my way of thinking. You start at the terminal end with 10, then 82, then 34. Okay? Have you got that? Primary, secondary, tertiary. Primary, secondary, tertiary. Yes, I'm writing this with my mouse. So it's not real pretty, but you get the point. Okay? Now, let's practice. Let's say you have 5 charts, and I want you to put them in order using the different filing systems. Okay, if we're using straight numeric, remember it reads from left to right, just like it says, straight numeric. All right, when you're looking at middle digit, you're looking at the middle 2 numbers, and then what? Left to right. So let's say on this first number, 454545, if we were doing middle digit, you'd start with the middle 45. If you were doing 135545, you would start with 55. Okay, and it's perfectly fine if you need to look back at the previous slides so that you can figure this out. But it's very important that you take this time to practice. So pause the recording and do this. Okay? And we know that terminal digit starts with the last 2 numbers. Go for it. Okay, let's check your answers and see how you did. Right? Okay. Straight numeric is pretty well. I bet you all got those right. Now, I promise you, in my slides, these lined up. Middle digit is the middle column, of course. And we notice how we do all the 4 5s. Yeah, there we go, 4 5s. And then you go to the 5 5s. You put them in order like that. Okay, so then we would put all of the 4 5s, the ones that have the middle digit of 4 5. And then we look at the left number. Okay, you see how those are? Okay, and now that we've got those in order, then you would, of course, look at the number on the right. Now, let's do terminal digit. Remember, we start with a number on the end, which is what we've done here. We put them in order there. Then these 3 all have 4 5. So that means we need to look at the second digits. So 4 5, 4 5, and 5 5. So these 2 are the same, the 4 5s. So then we just look at the first 2 numbers, the tertiary numbers, I should say, because we're reading backwards. The tertiary numbers we look at, and 2 2 comes before 4 5, so that record goes first. A little confusing, but does it make sense? Okay, if you didn't get them right, go back and try it again and practice, okay? And we're going to do this over again, right? Let's check the next ones. Now, list the sequence in the chart just before and just after the following example for each filing system. So what would be the number right before 330000 in straight numeric? What would be the number after that, after 330000? Okay, then you do the same thing in middle digit and terminal digit. What would be the number right before it and right after it? Pause the recording. Okay, it's time to check your work. How did you do? Need a little more practice, eh? Yeah, it sounds a little confusing, but it's really kind of cool. Now that you know about terminal digit, isn't it kind of cool because you know the secret to the filing in medical records? I was kind of excited about that. Little things excite me. What can I say? Okay, now that was filing. Now, numbering systems. Okay, remember that was filing. Numbering systems, we've got different types of numbering systems. We have unit numbering, and this keeps, the patient keeps the same number that's issued on the first admission for all future admissions. There are advantages and disadvantages to each one of these numbering systems, okay? The advantages, and you do need to know advantages and disadvantages of each. The advantages would be that all the information is filed in a single folder with a single medical record number. All the patient info is filed or linked together. It works well in computerized records. And it also facilitates the centralization of a record department because everything goes in that one medical record folder. Okay? Disadvantages. Sometimes multiple volumes are needed for long stays. Makes sense. There's uncertain expansion of the filing area if it's really, you know, big. And then sometimes, as with different systems, there's a problem with duplicates every once in a while. Okay, a duplicate would be where the same medical record number might be issued to two different people. For instance, maybe they're both named John Smith. Okay, yes. Serial numbering, and this is where a new medical record number and a new folder is issued and created for each admission. The advantages, hey, it's easy to assign the medical record number, right? Every time they're there, they get a new number. You have steady expansion of the filing area on the end. So it starts at one end and it goes to the other. And we've already talked about the weights. Okay? Disadvantages would be a new medical record number and a new folder with each admission. And if you have a lot of admissions, that can really be time consuming. Yes, it can. Doesn't seem like much, but they do add up. And then all of the medical record numbers must be indexed against the master patient index. And you're reading more about this in the textbook, the master patient index, right? And multiple locations must be accessed to retrieve patient records. For instance, if they are seen in clinic, then they have their records. The emergency department would have one every time the patient was seen. And then if they were admitted to the hospital, for each admission they would have. You see where we're getting at, okay? And I might add that those folders do cost money. Serial unit numbering is where a new medical record number is issued for each admission, but all of the old records are brought forward to the current folder. Okay? So the advantages, all the records are brought forward to form a unit record. They're all brought together in one record, right? The disadvantage is that you've got multiple medical record numbers assigned in the system per patient, and you have empty folders that are left on the shelf, which takes up space. And when those records are brought forward to that latest admission, okay, so it's kind of a waste, don't you think? So let's talk about some simple numbering options. We have sequential numbering, which is when the next number is issued. We have Social Security number, and that is used in the VA. That's the Veterans Administration. They go by Social Security number. The family numbering, and I might want to back up a bit because using a Social Security number in a regular hospital, one that has babies, okay, not all babies have Social Security numbers, so that doesn't really work in a normal hospital. And some older people may not have one. Think about people from another country. They wouldn't have a Social Security number here. So it works in the VA environment because those are veterans and they all have a Social Security number. But in other healthcare situations, it wouldn't work. You see, you understand why, right? If I asked you in an essay question why the Social Security number numbering option would not work, or if it would work in a healthcare facility other than the VA, you would be able to tell me why, right? There's also family numbering, and that's where everyone in the family has the same medical record number, and the tertiary number denotes the individuals. For example, here we have 0144556, okay, and then we have 0244556, right? I did want to add that in the family numbering, sometimes you'll see that in like physicians' offices. They use the same the family numbering, but you have to remember when it comes to, for example, divorced parents or parents that were have different last names or were never married, or different things like that, then you're coming into, if you're using family numbering, that can cause an issue there. Okay, now let's look at some more complex numbering options. The unit. Let's summarize a minute. Okay, The unit was where all the patient's admissions are in the same folder within the same medical record number. The serial, that's where patients get a new number with each encounter, and they need a listing of all the medical record numbers on each patient. Okay? Serial unit is where each time the patient's admitted, they're assigned a new medical record number, but all the previous charting is filed under the most recent medical record number. Okay? And you need to keep those straight in your head. Yes. Now, alphabetic filing system for paper-based medical records and also for MPIs. An MPI is a master patient index, which is a list of all of our patients that were ever seen and their medical record numbers, right, and diagnosis, etc. Okay, so the benefits. It's easy to use, no training's involved. Direct filing method, it's good for small facilities. If you're using an alphabetic filing system, think alphabetic now, okay? The drawbacks are there's no unique identifier. The alphabet doesn't expand evenly. Most of the records are B, C, H, M, S, and W. Okay? Okay, let's go through some alphabetic filing rules. The first rule is that you place the surname first, and then the first name followed by the middle initial, and you file it in strict alphabetical sequence. The surname is the last name, okay? You arrange the names in alphabetic order, like words in a dictionary. You follow it letter by letter to the end of the last name. Then you go to the first name and then the middle initial, okay? Like in a telephone directory listing. Now, rule number 3. If more than one person has the same name, the data is arranged by date of birth, with the oldest date of birth being filed first. Let's think about twins, huh? Twins. And they're still baby boy A and baby boy B. Okay, so then you're going to have to go by that date of birth, right? And the time of birth comes into play there, okay? Then number 4, you're going to look for names with prefixes such as D, Des, La, Mac, Mac, or Mech and Mac, or Vaughn. All of those types of names are filed as if it's one continuous word. Diarmond, you see the difference between D apostrophe Armand, it's filed as D Armand with Darmond with no apostrophe there, okay? Names beginning with Saint are filed as the word spelled out, S-A-I-N-T. Yeah, we're getting a little more complex here, aren't we? Number 6, compound, meaning hyphenated names, are filed as one word. You may have guessed that by now. So Craig-Pickett would just be Craig Pickett, okay? Names with religious titles are disregarded. So Sister Mary Douglas would simply be Douglas Mary. Father James Brown would just be Brown James, okay? Number 8, if an initial is given instead of the patient's first name or the middle name, the rule is file nothing before something. Drill that into your head. File nothing before something. So M. Brown goes before M.K. Brown, and M.K. Brown goes before Mary K. Brown. Okay? Does that make sense? All right. Number 9. Because of the difficulty in determining MC from MAC, MEC from MAC, some hospital file MC as if it were really MAC. So you need to find out their filing system if you are required to do so. Number 10, Spanish names include the mother and the father's last names. So Maria Dolores Soto Ramirez would be Soto Ramirez, comma, Maria Dolores. Make sense? For name changes, such as in the case of marriage or whatever, you provide a cross-reference to the previous name, and then you transfer all the pertinent data out of that old record into the new master patient index card, or computerized, okay? And we do have an master patient index example handout, so that you can kind of look at that. You keep both with a cross-reference note on the old card. That way, when they if they happen to look it up under the old name, then you're going to have a cross-reference to a new name. So in the case where someone may have been married multiple times or changed their name for other reasons multiple times, then you would have cross-references on each one of those cards, okay? Number 12, if you're using a traditional card master patient index, you want to perform an audit periodically looking for misfiles. You want to make sure new employees understand the alphabetic filing rules. Maybe require that they take a little quiz as part of their continuing education or on the job training or what have you. That way you can maybe see, okay? Use misfiles as a learning experience for those employees. Number 13, with a computerized master patient index, a Soundex, that's what it's called, a Soundex, will look up all similar sounded or spelled names. For instance, if you put in bear, it might pull up B-A-E-R, B-E-A-R or B-A-Y-E-R. Okay, makes sense? Remember, there's a difference between numbering systems and filing systems. A numbering system is the order that the number is issued to the patient and or placed on the patient's file folder. Filing is the order that it's placed on the shelf. For example, you have straight numeric numbering, but terminal digit or middle digit filing. Okay, when we're looking at numbering options, we have unit, where all the patient submissions are brought forward in the same medical record number. I know we're repeating these, but it's very important that we keep going back over and over so we keep it straight. Serial is where the patients get a new number with each encounter. You'll need a list of all the medical record numbers on each patient if you go with that. Okay? And then a serial unit is each time a patient is admitted, they're assigned a number, but all the previous charting is filed under the most recent. Okay? Let's talk a little bit about health record storage and maintenance. We're going to do a little math. Yeah, we got to do it. You can get your little calculator out or use the one on your computer or on your phone or whatever, or paper and pencil. General Hospital admits 50 patients on Monday and treats 75 patients in the emergency room. As a result, how many records are generated? Okay, if this represents the average activity, how many records would be generated over a year? Where are those records going to be stored once the treatment has been provided? So you can see why those calculations come in handy. If you are an HIM director and you're going to expand your file area, you'll need to be able to estimate. And if they're wanting you to have look at your file expansion for the next 15 years, or 5 years is typically, 5 years is typically what they go by, or 3 to 5, something like that. You just, ever how much, you can calculate that or give a rough estimate, okay? So, let's do our little word problem here. And I know, try not to think about it as algebra, try not to think about it really as a word problem. Let's use common sense. If we have 50 patients on Monday admitted to the hospital, and we have 75 patients in the emergency room, we add those two together and we have how many per day, right? 125? Did you get that? Okay. Let's go to the next one. If this represents the average activity, meaning that this is what you can pretty much see on a daily basis on the average, you do that, your 125 times the days in the year, and then you get your answer of 45,625 records per year. Now you see why I said if you're creating a folder every time a new admission comes into play, that's 45,625 folders. And you can imagine how that could add up if you're paying someone to create the folders, if you're paying someone, and number them, and you're paying for the folders themselves and the numbering, All right, let's move right along. So where are the records stored once the treatment has been provided? In the Health Information Management Department, in the file room, in storage, or in the EPF, which is an electronic patient folder. Okay? Electronic patient folder is what EPF stands for. Storage space. Let's think about this practically. If you can file 5 records in an inch of filing space, how many inches of filing space is General Hospital going to need this year in order to handle their new patients? Okay? See, we're working it out. We're working it out. So remember that we had 45,625 records per year, right? And if we can get 5 records per inch, we divide that 45,625 by 5 records per inch, and we get 9,125 inches. Okay, let's convert that into feet so we'll know how many feet. We've got 9,125 inches divided by 12, which there's 12 inches to a foot, right? Okay, and that gives us 760.41666 feet. Okay, so in this example, we would round up to get 761 feet. Okay, you always have to think ahead to what your needs will be in 1 or 2 years out, or possibly 5 years out. Perhaps you're looking over time, like you can see that you have increased the number of patients you've seen over a year has increased 1,000 or 2,000 or 3,000 a year, so you can calculate that in also, okay, if needed. I always fall back on look at shelving for shoes. You know how many pairs of shoes you can fit on a shelf? Well, it's the same way when we're looking on a shelf that is 6 foot long or 3 foot long, right? And maybe there's 4 shelves. You can figure out how many pairs of shoes you fit on there. Well, it works the same way with medical records, but typically you're allowing so many per inch, and that's how you're calculating how many will fit on there, okay? So you don't look at the elephant, you break it down into smaller bites, okay? If math panics you, just break it down into smaller bites. Okay, a new patient. A new patient is seen in a hospital either as an inpatient or an outpatient, and they're called a new patient. Okay, a folder or a chart is created, and the patient is given a unique medical record number. Which type of numbering scheme has this hospital selected? What do you think? Okay, let's take a look at the simple numbering options. Blank numbering. You fill in the blanks here, right? Can you fill in the blanks? If you can't, go back and review the slides that we've looked at so far. Or you could just look at the next one. Okay. Again, complex numbering options. You've got unit, where all the patients' admissions are in the same folder within the same medical record number. You've got serial, where the patients get a new number with each encounter. And you'll need a listing of all the medical record numbers on each patient. Serial unit is where each time the patient is admitted, they get a new medical record number, but all of the previous charting is filed under the most recent medical record number. And I know you're going to remember the pros and cons of all of these, right? Filing systems for paper-based records. There's 3 major classifications, okay? We've got alphabetic, we've got numeric, and we've got alphanumeric. Alphabetic, hey, there's benefits and there's drawbacks. Benefits, it's easy to use. No, well, we say no training involved, but minimal. Let's say minimal, because some people really struggle with alphabetic filing for some reason. And there's no shame in that. It's not anything we can't work on. Excuse me. Direct filing method. And it's good for small facility. The drawbacks would be there's no unique identifier. The alphabet doesn't expand evenly, and then you're going to have a lot of the B, C, H, M, S, and W. Numeric, you use the patient's health record number. It's a type of indirect filing system. It's better for large organizations. There's several types of numeric filing. We have straight numeric, right? We have terminal digit. We have middle digit. And then we have alphanumeric, which we haven't really talked about yet, have we? Oh, yeah, we did a little bit. Okay, you remember the alphabetic filing rules: last name, first name, middle initial. We've got them all here, right? And you know what order they'd be filed in. But what if the patient has the same last name, first name, and middle initial? What do you file by then? Did you get it right? You file the records by the date of birth, with the earliest date of birth going first. And sometimes twins are like just a minute apart, okay? You have to really look at that time. Okay. What about Irish last names with an apostrophe or spaces, like McBain, McDougall, or Mackle? You would be filing them like this. What about hyphenated names? A woman marries and adds her husband's name to her own. Her last name is Mayonnaise, or Manasseh, and her husband's name is O'Brien. It would be filed without the dash and without the apostrophe. Okay? Do we need to know the alphabetic filing rules for a numeric filing system? Authority file? The master patient index. Okay. Label each one of these. Can you get it right? Which one is what? Test yourself here. Okay, components of terminal digit. The records are easier to read when segmented in sets of groups. Instead of 324685, do it 324685. Now, I do want to add that in some file rooms, they may have like separated into, have extra digits and say 1324685 or something like that, okay? Because you have to remember how large this can get in huge hospitals. All right, remember that 85, we're talking about terminal digit, remember 85 is the file section number. 46 is the shelf number, and 32 is the folder number, right? Okay. Another way of looking at it is looking at primary, secondary. How many are we looking at? We have 100 primary, 100 secondary for 10,000 divisions, okay, in a file room. Now you see the rest of the story. And yes, that's important to know. Here's some samples of terminal digit. Is this in terminal digit order? Yes or no? Okay, let's practice again. And no, it wasn't. In this example, using the 5 medical record numbers, place them in the correct sequential order for each filing method. Remember, we had the 3 filing methods. Place them in order. Now, I want you to read the handout from the AMRA, and it's on numbering and filing systems. It has questions and their answers throughout the reading, and I want you to be sure that you try to answer all of these on your own and do the check your understanding. Filing options, we have centralized and we have decentralized. Centralized is where all the activity, whether it's inpatient, outpatient, emergency room, or emergency department, as it's now called, clinics, wherever, they're all kept in one place. Okay? Decentralized is where the emergency room or emergency department visits are there. They keep their own files. The outpatient visits keep their own files in the clinics. The clinics keep their own files. And then the inpatient activity is kept in the HIM department. So everybody's got their own records there. It's not all in one tidy, neat place. So if the physician wanted to, for instance, review past records, and you have decentralized records, then you would have to request records from the emergency department, from the outpatient clinics, and from the HIM department, and get those inpatient records, okay? If it's centralized, they would just request it from the HIM department and they would all be there, okay? Much easier that way, right? Centralized. Filing options. The problem with blank records, the ER keeping copies, the patient making separate, PT making separates. The AHIMA position, they recommend centralized. And the clinical consideration of decentralized, it can compromise patient care and confidentiality issues when all of these records are in so many different locations, okay? Supplies and equipment. We have folders, and the folders, remember we're talking about paper records here, the folders, you can get them pre-printed or not pre-printed. The folder has to have the name of the facility on it and the name of the patient, right? Okay. The name of the physician, it's got to be labeled confidential. I was looking to see if I have and I do have a copy. I have some de-identified records that I will be probably giving you an example of later, but we've got also got pictures here so we can look at that. When you're buying folders, you have to look at whether you want to order them pre-printed or not. Some smaller facilities will have a stamp and stamp their name and address and confidential and do all that stamping at the facility and just order the folders not labeled. Personally, it's a lot easier to order them pre-printed if it can be afforded. The weight of the paper makes a difference. Do you need a folder that is going to be used a lot? For example, you would want a heavier weight paper, but if you're not expecting, quote, repeat customers or repeat patients, then it wouldn't be as important. And your textbook tells you um, you can, in the reading, assigned reading, it talks about the different weights of folders and that type of thing, and you have to look at durability and expansion, because some folders, you might just need a flat folder. Other folders, you need to consider the type that will expand for a long-term stay at a long-term facility. You may want to have a mixture of each. It just kind of depends. Fasteners, we've already seen the fasteners. You can get them to where they're at the top of the folder, and you slide the paper on those, or it can be on the side, or it can be on the top and the side, depending on what your facility prefers. They can be permanently affixed. The fasteners can be already on there when you order the folders, or it can be to where they have an adhesive back and you place them on there in the department yourself. You can order them with a year bar, but it's really easier if you actually label those with the year yourself. Why would you want to put the year on there? Well, when you're required to keep health records for a minimum of, or the recommended minimum, plus this state of Arkansas recommends 10 years for adults, and then 2 years past the age of majority for children's records, which would be, if it's the age of majority is 18, then you would have to keep them until they're 20, or they're 10 years after their last visit, So you have to keep that in mind too. So if you're purging records, if you haven't seen a patient in so many years, you might move those to their file to an inactive file area, and then that way they can be retrieved, but after so many years they can also be purged. Purge means that you could either purge them to storage, or they can be purged as in destroyed. Okay. So if the year is on there, it makes it a lot easier to go down through there and just look for a certain year when you're pulling records out, so that you can make room for new records. And believe me, that does take some time to do. Expansion folders, we've talked about that, being able to make the folder wider. Color coding labeling, it creates a pattern on the shelf, and different companies offer different styles and color coding, so you want to pick one and stick with it, because if you suddenly go with a different color code combination, then it's going to throw everything off. Okay, so we're going to look at that a little more. So tell me everything you know about color coding. Why do we do it? What determines the price of the folders? Blah, blah, blah. Well, in color coding, each number is assigned a color, and color coding improves filing efficiencies. So if something's out of order, it's a lot easier to spot it. Okay? Look at this one. A misfiled record betrays itself by disrupting the color pattern, the color block. You see how that 6-5, you see how these numbers right here, that 6-5 is not black, and the 4-5 is not all red, right? So we know that one's out of color, out of place, just by looking at the color. So who does the numbering? You can either get them pre-numbered, or number labels can be ordered. Okay? And labels, you want to typically order labels for a year, so you're getting a lot of them. A lot of times they're in a numeric tray, a label tray like this, and you just pull them off as you need them. And it's like a two-sided sticker, and you fold it over the end. Okay, and I have posted a YouTube video that is an excellent demonstration of how to put together a medical record, okay, and place the stickers and all of that. As you can see right here in this picture, that's the type of the tabs that you can stick on yourself if you don't order folders with it, okay? And you see these all come in different combinations and things like that. And they come in different sizes. So the file name appears on two sides with a wraparound label. See how it goes on this side and on the other side, so you can read it from either direction. The first two letters of the last name are used for color coding the file. That's in alphabetic color coding, okay? And remember that not all file rooms have the alphabetic filing or numeric. Okay, when we're talking about pre-printed, you can get them pre-printed or not, and you can get color or just the manila folders, which are a lot less expensive. You can get the fasteners that are already attached, or you can attach them yourself. When we're talking about expanding folders, this is where they have the expansion pockets, okay? And files can be dropped in. You see how this right here expands the folder and it's not flat. Then we have x-ray filing, and radiology jackets or folders is what those are called, radiology jackets. And they look a little different, as you can see from the picture here. They protect and preserve those valuable diagnostic images. Rules for out guides, and this, my friend, is an out guide. You see in the picture how it's a paper there. Okay, I mean plastic typically, and those are more durable and they slide in and out a lot easier. I've worked with the cardboard kind, and I've worked with these plastic and would much rather work with the plastic ones. You see how it's labeled out on the end of it. Up here would be where you slide the little checkout. You fill out a little card and tell you who's checking it out, the location, what date it was checked out, and when it's supposed to be returned. Okay? Then you slide, when you pull that record, you slide this out guide. It's just like one this is a whole stack of them, but you slide that into the place where the record is. If you get some loose filing in before the record is returned, then you can slide it down into this pocket. And then when the record is brought back and they file it in the cabinet on the shelf, then they will add these documents. I am just making this worse instead of any better. And they file these documents in the record. So you see how the system is working there. So the guides are in the file area, and they're used for speed in finding medical record numbers. The amount of activity determines the frequency, and then the size of the hospital, and whether it's a teaching facility or a research facility. Now, I want you to be sure and watch the YouTube videos that I've posted in the learning module, because I think they will help you understand these filing systems and also help you to understand how records are put together and how those things work. Retention policies. How long do you keep a master patient index? What about a registry? How long do you keep those? The indices, different types of, like disease index, the physician index, all those different indices. How many do you keep? How long do you keep them? Patient medical records. How long do you keep those? Is there a difference in retention periods for adult charts versus pediatric charts? Let's talk about that. For adults, HIMT recommends 10 years after the most recent encounter. 10 years after the most recent encounter. Then for minors, it's the age of majority as defined by state law, which typically is 18, plus a statute of limitation. So you have to keep all of that in mind. So there are, and this is their recommendation. You have to check the regulations for your state, okay? Because those will override the recommendations, and I would go with whichever is the stricter, okay? Storage of records. You have to allow enough space. There has to be climate control. They have to have a protection from water, mold, fire, insects, rodents, natural disasters, etc. Yes. They're also like, if, for instance, what happens when there's flood, or what happens when the water sprinklers go off in a paper file room, okay? Things like that. You have to call in special companies that are, they specialize in coming in and drying things out, and everything has to be scattered and dried out so there won't be any mold and water damage, you know? You have to save what you can, and yes, things like that do happen. Retrieval of records of patient for patient care is very important, and if they're in storage, there needs to be a procedure for retrieving those. Storage, it can be open versus closed. It can be manual versus motorized or compressed. You need to know the number of records per filing inch, the number of sheets per inch, the number of inches per standard shelf, the number of shelves per unit, and space. And all of that you will know, my dears. Let's talk about carousel files. Carousel files, you make use of a small space. In this diagram, in this picture on the left, this carousel is used for binders. Sometimes the policy and procedure manuals will all go on there. Yes, there can be a number of them. Or it could be patient records out on the floor. Now, that's a binder carousel. The pictures on the right is an end tab carousel. And you see how you can see the end tab of those file records so that you would just roll it around and pull the record that you need. And it's got this right here is a shelf that kind of pulls out, and you can see it in this picture. So that you can examine that record and see if it's what you need or add to it or what have you. Then we have open shelving. And open shelving is in a fixed location. It doesn't move. It can be single-faced or double-faced. This first one in this example here, that's single-faced because you can only put records on one side. This one is double-faced because you can put records over here on this side and you can put records over here. Okay? And this is also known as 4-post or L&T shelving. And you can see how it can line up, and just imagine having that big old room and it's filled with medical records. Lateral mobile shelving. Lateral is a manual, and you push them from side to side. You can see how this one goes from this direction, and it can be pushed this direction. It can go either way so that you can access the records back behind there. Okay? This is 2 fixed and 1 mobile on rails or a track. Okay? Locks. Well, if you've got if you're working for a physician, he may have all his records in 1 or 2 cabinets like this. You have to consider locks, doors that lock. The file cabinet should lock here, and also the office door locks, and then another area, you know, have doors, locks, okay? We have to look at HIPAA concerns. Compressed shelving. This one is a little bit different in that it's one of the most space efficient systems available. It eliminates the need for aisles to a certain extent, and it can double or even triple the storage space capacity. As you can see here, it's got on the end, you turn the crank and it moves it, you turn it to the right or the left, and then there's should be a button to press to lock it into place, because if somebody's in between there and somebody comes up and just starts rolling, you can smash someone in there and hurt them. Okay, and they do get a little bit more fancy, and some of these have push buttons, and they may have along the bottom here, they may have things that pick up movement and can see if anything's in the way, and it won't move if it detects that someone or something is there to prevent injuries. So, conversion issues. What types? You have to consider the different types of conversion and what type of prepping is needed. What happens later? When should you convert? And then there's some pros and cons to different things. Do you want to, if you're converting from paper, what are you converting to? Are you scanning it in? Are you using microfiche? Are you putting it on something else? Let's take a look at these options. Microfilm or fiche. Woohoo! It can be expensive. You have to pay to have the record stored on the film. You need a machine to read it. This machine would go to this, and you also have one that looks at the film here. And is the indexing included? That's something you need to be able to look it up, right? Is it printable? So if someone requests a copy of it, you have to look at that. And then the quality of that film. What's it going to be like? Now, in some facilities that have been around a while, yes, they do have records stored on microfilm. And when you're having to use one of these machines and go through there real quick with the film, I can tell you from experience, it can cause motion sickness. And the employees may need frequent breaks to prevent that. The flashing could actually, when you're looking for a record and going real quick, it could cause a migraine, the flashing. Me personally, whenever I worked for the Center for Birth Defects and I was reviewing at a hospital and had to pull records from film and document, and oh my goodness, yeah, I had motion sickness. And I was so embarrassed because I was like, oh my gosh, I'm feeling so sick. And they said, yeah, it's real common, So I finally learned that I would have to, if it was older records like that, I could do it for a short time, and then I'd have to take a break and do a little bit on each day when I went back there, because it was more than I could handle. I admire people who can do it. I'm just not one of those that can do it for very long. The times have changed, and yes, it's improved. COLD, C-O-L-D, that stands for Computer Output to Laser Disc. Yes, and you have to have something called I'm thinking it's a dual, what is it? A jukebox, that's it, to read those. And they can be expensive and take up space also. I know of one facility that tried to use that, and it was just, they gave up and started using something else. Circulation systems, a conveyor belt. We all know what a conveyor belt is, right? A dumbwaiter, where you can move things up and down. How about the pneumatic tube for computers? The pneumatic tube, believe it or not, think about going through the drive-through at the bank, and you put your deposit in the little tube and you put it in and you send it up. Well, used to, and it may still be this way in some older, smaller facilities, when a patient was admitted and everything was entered, then you would print out the phase sheet and all the admitting orders and all of that type of stuff, and you would have it all together and you would put it in a tube and send it up to the nursing unit where the patient was being admitted. Okay, so it worked just like it does, you know, kind of like in the drive-through at the bank. That's what the pneumatic tube does. A dumbwaiter is where it's it kind of works like an elevator. Okay, conveyor belt, you turn it on and it moves it down the road, right? And I think we're all pretty used to computers. Destruction policies. We just have a few more slides, folks. Okay, let's talk about destruction policy. Destruction of records after the time limits for retention have been reached must ensure that records are either burned or shredded or destroyed in a way that personal health information is not revealed. A retention plan in a departmental policy and procedure manual has to be in place and followed. The facility, what happens if it's closed or sold? Arrangements have to be made for those records. They have to be kept for so many years, or maybe they're transferred to a certain place, or what have you. Sometimes if the physician has sold their practice, then they will have you sign a release and your record goes to that physician or whatever. You document the process, whatever it is, and work with a reputable vendor. Okay, story time. As a student, I went on a clinical to a psychiatric clinic. Not in Little Rock, not local. Well, it was, you know what I mean. It was driving distance for me. And they were destroying records. They had a trash can out back, a burn barrel, and they would just throw the records out there and burn them. Well, pieces of those records were flying around. They didn't have like any kind of fencing or grate over the burn barrel, number one. And the pieces of records were flying around, and I picked up a piece that had patient information on it. And as an HIM student, I was very concerned about this and went in and was trying to tell someone, and they acted like it was no big deal. Okay, now HIPAA's come into play. Do you think that would fly now? I don't think so. No. Okay, so that's one story. Okay. Let's go on. Destruction. We have some key policy issues that you need to know about. You need to know the statute of limitations. Not just the HIMT recommended, but you need to know what's listed at your facility. You need to double check with the state health department and check state statutes and regulations, okay? You need to also consider the space available to store the records or the charts. You have to consider the growth rate. You have to also consider the activity in the files. How often are those patients readmitted? Or if it's a clinic, how often are they seen again? Is it outpatient surgery center where you'll see a patient and unless they, need surgery again, you're not likely to see them again, right? Okay. Or they might be followed up in a clinic or whatever. All right, you just have to take that into consideration. And you also take into consideration the cost to maintain and how many research requests are done on site. For instance, UAMS does a lot of research, and they will go back for many, many, many years. So you have to, those types of things would be considered. Okay, we want to review those alphabetic rules. Remember the surname or the last name, first name, middle initial. If the name is the same, Peterson, John J., what do? You look at the date of the birth, right? Okay, and if the date of birth is the same, you look at the time of birth. Okay, remember the rules about Vaughn, St. Smith, Pickett? What about Dr. Jones? How would his record be filed? Drop that doctor, right? Initial only. Remember, something before nothing. Or nothing before something. I said it backwards, didn't I? So, all of that considered, what's meant by phonetic filing? What is phonetic filing? Well, sometimes it's used in facilities located in communities with large population with foreign names. The patient's index card is filed behind the appropriate guide for the initial letter of the surname, but according to sound rather than the spelling. So all surnames that sound alike but are spelled differently are filed together. Okay? Yeah, so phonetic filing is by what it actually sounds like. And that's going to conclude our lesson for today, folks. We're finished.